Madam Chair, I have a lot to say. My colleague, Mr. Heiss, has a lot to do. I'm going to yield to Mr. Heiss so that he can speak briefly and go back to his committee.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank my good friend for yielding a quick moment. There are a few people in Washington, D.C. and in America that have had the impact of Senator Johnny Isakson. And when we think of Senator Isakson, no question, there are so many things that come to our mind. Senator, you have been an incredible statesman, a phenomenal leader, both in Georgia, here in the United States Senate, and in our country. And we just want to say thank you for all that you have done for us. I think personally, when I first came to Congress, you were one of the first individuals to reach out to me and to give advice and encouragement. And to this day, every time I see you, you do that. And you will never know how much that means. And I just want to publicly state that Johnny Isakson, Senator Isakson, is a hero for people all across this country. Your brilliant mind and your leadership will always be here. And we say thank you from the bottom of our heart. And may God bless you and your family as you go into this next chapter. Thank you. I yield back.
Madam Speaker, today my colleagues and I rise to honor the legislative legacy and the life of my good friend and colleague and fellow Georgia Bulldog, U.S. Senator Johnny Isakson. For more than 20 years, Senator Isakson has served the people of Georgia in the United States Congress, tirelessly fighting for the people of Georgia. During his tenure, Senator Isakson has been a bellwether for many in our delegation, both as a member of this body and as a United States Senator. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. Where's Johnny on this? What does Johnny think about this? Have you spoken to Johnny on this? He has offered counsel that's been learned through his 40 years of public service that is invaluable to me and many of us in the Georgia delegation and throughout this nation. I have many personal stories about Johnny. Some of them are appropriate for the floor, some of them are not. But my first recollection of Senator Isakson was a call that I made as a young teenager when we had a mutual friend and I needed a little help getting him through the ballot process at the fraternity house. And Senator Isakson picked up the phone and called, and a few minutes later the president of the fraternity walked in and said, "I'm not quite sure who spoke to Senator Isakson, but this is the way the next vote's going to go." And that was all it took. So I can't tell you over the last 30 plus years how much you've meant to me and to my family. And when I'm back home, I constantly tell people of the respect our delegation and all the members of the House and the Senate have for you. You have brought forward a sense of bipartisanship and working across the aisle for the good of all Georgians. He's played a key role in building and maintaining his reputation, and I look forward to that special tradition continuing in the coming legislative sessions. Public service is much more than just the service of the member. It's also the service of the family. Senator Isakson, your children, your wonderful wife, Diane, we extend our thanks for their commitment to serve Georgia and their support to our delegation and fellow delegation members. Their impact cannot be understated, and we look forward to you enjoying more time with Diane and your entire family as you enter your next chapter. For decades, Senator Isakson and his family have faithfully served our state. His character, godliness, and statesmanship will be greatly missed in Washington, D.C. His faithful service to the great state of Georgia is second only to our beloved mascot, Uga. He is a giant among men and dogs, dedicated and deliberate, and it has been an honor to work alongside him, fighting for the good people of Georgia and the veterans of the United States of America. With that, I yield to my colleague and my fellow Georgian, Mr. Lewis.
Speaker, I want to thank my beloved colleague and my friend for yielding. I would like to thank our colleague, Mr. Scott, for organizing this special order tribute to a great man, to a wonderful human being. Madam Speaker, I rise to recognize Senator Johnny Isakson, a son of Atlanta, Georgia. Senator Isakson is a special man. He is a good man. I want to thank him for his years of service in the Georgia State Legislature, in the United States House of Representatives, and now in the United States Senate. On February the 25th, 1999, I introduced Johnny as the newest member of the Georgia Congressional Delegation to the House of Representatives. He came to Congress as a graduate of the University of Georgia and a successful businessman. Before coming to Congress, he served as a member of the Georgia Air National Guard, the State House Minority Leader, a state senator, and as the chair of the State Board of Education. On that day, I said he brought a wealth of knowledge with him. I explained to our colleagues that in his decades of public service in our home state, Johnny delivered a reputation, or developed a great reputation as a bridge builder, a man who has strong belief, but also willing to work with others to get things done. Very quickly, members of the House and Senate discovered how true this was. This senator does not make a lot of noise, but he has the ability and the power, the capacity to speak to power. When Johnny served in the House of Representatives, we always found a way to come together, and we continue that tradition when he was elected to the Senate. Over the years, we worked together on many, many issues, like transportation, water, housing, and veteran affairs. We always find a way to get along and to do the good work that people deserve. And time again, he stood with us. He worked with us to uplift African American in the state of Georgia, to recognize individuals like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Jackie Robinson, native of Georgia. He did not just talk the talk, he literally walked the walk. Senator, you not only supported the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act in 2006, but a few years later, you even co-led the congressional delegation to Selma, Alabama. I want to say thank you for all of your good and great work. Those of us who know you will agree that you're always thoughtful and mindful, a warm and welcome gentleman in the truest sense of the word. For 2 decades, you, Senator, led a team that could cross the aisle without compromising your values. When our constituent came over for a meeting with you and your staff, they felt heard and respected. I hope you do not mind, but I would like to share a moment that stand out for me and will always stand out for me as long as I live to this very day. One morning before I was scheduled to read the 13th Amendment on the House floor, you asked me to come and speak with your staff about service and my own experiences. We had an honest and thoughtful discussion. It was one of the most meaningful, memorable experiences for my years in the Congress. I carry my heart to this very day, to this very moment. What you said, I believe 20 years have passed since I stood on the very floor to introduce you to Congress. As you return to private life with your beloved wife, Diane, of 51 years, and your wonderful beautiful children and grandchildren, I would like to thank you, Johnny, for your years of service. I would like to thank you for the service to our state, our nation. I wish you health and happiness, and take some time to enjoy a beautiful and wonderful life in the state of Georgia. You have been very good to the people of the state of Georgia, and I'm lucky enough and just blessed really to call you a friend and a brother. Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, it is almost difficult to yield back the time when I speak of this good and great leader from the state of Georgia. Thank you, brother, for your service. I will come over to meet you, brother.
Madam Speaker, I wish all of America could be here to see that. Two icons from Georgia embracing. What a wonderful sight that I think is representative of the days of the past and the days to come, and how we should work together. Thank you both so much for not just for what you do, but for who you are. Madam Speaker, I now yield to my colleague, Mr. Graves.
Thank Representative Scott for coordinating this this hour of tribute to a dear friend, and how humbling it is to follow my good friend Representative Lewis, who swore me in just the same, Johnny, just over 9 years ago, right here in this same spot. I know we could take more than an hour. This would certainly take more than an hour, and I know this is a Georgia delegation moment. But Senator, I'm certain that if the House would allow, that member after member from state after state would come down here and pay a tribute just the same as we are today. But as members, we get up each and every day, we work hard to make sure our constituents have a great place to live and provide for their families. And it's not often that we have the opportunity to share about the impact that a single person might have made on our very own lives. So today is one of those rare occasions for me, and I get to do that today through the recognition of one of Georgia's giants. And I'm going to do this today, Senator, take the opportunity to share of our first interaction, my first introduction to Senator Isakson. It was November 6th, it was 1990, and I was just your average 20-year-old college student. I was apolitical. I was just looking for a free meal that night. I was an idealist, very open-minded. And I was invited that night by my roommate to attend a political gathering. My roommate just happened to be the son of Freddie Stevenson, who's a dear friend of ours, Senator. And that was my very first political event ever that I had attended. And it happened to be the gubernatorial election night celebration, or that's at least what I anticipated that night. I can remember that evening as if it were yesterday, and Senator, I know you can as well, as can so many others. Now, as a North Georgia country boy, I didn't grow up in wealth or politics. I just worked hard every day, just trying to get through each and every day. But that night, I was impacted. There was a lot of energy, there was excitement in the room, and that's infectious, I know it is, but that's not what it was that night. I was impacted more so than anything by a single person. a person I didn't even know yet, a person that I would soon get to know very well, though. You might suggest that I was impressed by his resume, his history, and what all he had done. I mean, after all, we gloss over what has been accomplished, but he has served in the Georgia Air National Guard. He was 14 years in the Georgia House as a minority leader. He was co-chair of a presidential campaign, president of one of the largest real estate companies in the country, and yes, has been mentioned, he was a Georgia Bulldog. All of that by 1990. That's impressive, but that's not what captured me that night. I was totally unaware of all those things. Nor could it have been his future, because none of us knew. None of us knew what that might be yet. That was so many years ago. The fact that he would one day run and be elected to the state Senate, that he would be a candidate for U.S. Senate in 1996, he'd head the state school board, be elected to the U.S. House in 1999, sworn in by the great John Lewis, and then 5 years later elected to the United States Senate as our senior senator. That was something so much more, Johnny. Something more, there was so much more than that, Senator, that we had yet to know. I mean, it was more than your resume. It was more than your title, and it was more than you were going to accomplish that stirred me, or that stirs any individual. It was on that night in 1990 where a man I had never met, with a name I certainly couldn't pronounce, with a history that I didn't know or a future yet untold, he caught my attention. My first true interaction, my first impact by a political figure in my life was that night in 1990. When the results were not what they had hoped for, or what the senator had hoped for at the time, or what they had worked for, and yet they were in a room of friends and supporters and had to address them that night. Now, if you were an onlooker like me and a 20-year-old college student, what do you expect? You expect maybe there's going to be bitterness. There's going to be regret. There's going to be some blaming. There's going to be some divisiveness. It sounds so familiar, certainly today, but it was different. Instead, Johnny Isakson, he took the stage with grace, with respect, with dignity, with vision, and with a confidence that I never expected in a person. And whether he knew it that night, at that time, he chose to impact, and he chose to inspire, and he chose to inspire me. I know this story is not unique to me. I know it's not. There's 45 years of stories like that, Senator. I just happen to be one. He was paying forward before it was even a thing to do. And now 29 years later, I can stand before each of you. I stand before you as one who served in the Georgia House for 7.5 years, and now in my 10th year here in Congress, and a future still yet untold. I get to stand before you, Senator, and say thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Isakson. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being an example of what is needed so much today. And it's with deep gratitude that I get to pay tribute in your farewell to the one who might have lost an election in 1990, but won the trust of a 20-year-old college student that night. A true fighter for Georgia, a great statesman, and a dear friend. Thank you. Thank you so much, and may God bless you in the days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. And I now yield to my friend and colleague, Mr. Bishop.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I thank my colleagues for this special order giving tribute to a good and a great man. Winston Churchill once said, "You make your living by what you get. You make your life by what you give." My friend Johnny Isakson has given so much to so many for so long. He has truly made a life. Johnny Isakson has been a true statesman in his remarkable career as a public servant for Georgians. I first met Johnny in 1977, where we served together in the Georgia General Assembly. We developed a friendship which has endured through our work together in the State House, the U.S. House of Representatives, and during his service as our Georgia Senator. Throughout his career, he's not viewed issues from a partisan perspective, but for the good of all Americans. Johnny served as a Republican in both chambers of Georgia's state legislature, but he was appointed by Georgia's Democratic governor, Zell Miller, to be the chairman of the Georgia State Board of Education. His integrity, his kindness are invaluable qualities in a legislator and have no doubt been a defining measure of his success. I am honored to call Johnny my friend. We will miss him in the delegation. His loss will be felt deeply, but we can all agree that he is very much deserving of a happy retirement spent with his wife, Diane, their children and grandchildren. And we wish you the best, Johnny. The poet said, "Isn't it strange how princes and kings and clowns that caper in sawdust rings and common folks like you and me are builders for eternity. Each is given a bag of tools, a shapeless mass, and a set of rules, and each must make ere life is flown a stumbling block or a stepping stone." The people of Georgia, the people of our nation, and indeed people all across the world are so blessed that you have used your life and your career not as a stumbling block, but as a stepping stone for a higher, better quality of life for humankind. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. And I want to thank Senator Isakson as well for his service to our nation's veterans and his role as chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. He served our military veterans faithfully for many, many years. And I want to yield the floor now to my friend and colleague, Mr. Collins, one of the men who serves us in multiple capacities, both in the Air Force and as a member of Congress.
Thank you, Austin. I appreciate it. And to be here, to hear just the accomplishments of Senator Isakson, or as one of the people that you go along, you find in life that you have to know him by a title or you have to know him by a last name. In the state of Georgia, when you say Johnny, everybody knows who you're talking about, especially when it comes to our politics. And for me, to rattle off everything that's already been said, it's breathtaking what you've done and what you accomplished from business to career. And those are things that's worthy of the page in your life. But for many of us here, just as my friends were saying earlier, you have a personal attachment to many of us, whether you realize it or not. For those of us who come forward in public service and you need role models and mentors, and you hear about those who succeeded and failed and succeeded and failed, and which is something many of us have to get used to, whether we want to or not. For me, it's watching you in the times when probably you didn't know you were being watched. It was the times when I watched you as a young person in the State House in Georgia going to a meeting, and they recognized and said, you know, Johnny is here, would you like to say a few words? And for most of us, it's struggling just to come up with a couple of words that actually sound good together, much less sentences. But Johnny Isakson would stand up and for the next 5 minutes rattle off a speech that you would have swore would have been honed for years, and it touched the very soul of everybody there. I was in awe, and I watched you do it so many times. You listened. In this business, that's pretty impressive. And that's why you got stuff done. I remember every time I would come to you, and there would be times that I would be asking a question, and I would go along, and instead you would answer, you would listen, you would answer the question, and I went away feeling better just by being with you. I remember when I talked to you right after you announced us that you were going to leave a big hole in our delegation. And the first thing you said to me when I picked up the phone, as you did almost every time, Doug, thank you. You're doing a great job. even when I knew that probably wasn't true. When you understand, though, what it takes to lift people up, you leave a mark. You leave a special mark. For those of us in politics who struggled many times over the past few years to go into groups that would call us names and not like us, even when they supposedly were on our side, I watched what you did. You would go into those groups. You would sneak in the back after the meeting started. They would see you there. They would recognize you. And you stood and you spoke. You never backed up. You never backed down. But you made a lot of converts simply by being there. For those of us in public service, if you've showed me or showed anybody anything, is it being in the room, being a participant, listening to people and caring about them, even if you disagree with them, is the largest step we can take to make sure that we have a union that matters. So from me and my house, for a profession that we have taken on who needs role models, we stand on your shoulders. You are the giant in the room from our perspective of watching what happens and how it happens. And when I got to Washington, D.C., I knew the one thing that I wanted to do was actually pass legislation, because I'd heard you say one time before, why we come up here if we don't get anything done? Johnny, you are far beyond the policy. You were to the heart of people, and it will be missed in this place. But it is alive now, and we turn to you and that vision more than anything. And of course, as you know, I still represent part of Athens and Clark County. You're a Georgia graduate. And as we sort of say around those parts, Johnny, you're a damn good dog. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I now yield to my colleague, the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. McBath.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I'm so glad that we are gathered here today to honor our colleague. It's an honor to represent Georgia's 6th District here in Congress, and it's truly an honor to hold the seat that Senator Isakson once held. Senator Isakson has spent decades in service to the state of Georgia and to our great nation. His legacy has left an unforgettable mark on Georgia and the United States Senate. He is known in our community for being a friendly neighbor and for being a truly good man. And I am honored to call you my friend. We share a passion to make Georgia the best place to live and to start a family. We share a dedication to making America a more perfect union. And I know that I've not been in the Georgia delegation very long, but I thank you for putting people over party and for your commitment to the best policy, which is not always easy politics. We live in an age where loyalty to partisanship has too often come at the expense of the American people. And we live in an age where compromise has become a dirty word. We live in an age where the American people have become disillusioned with the American government. Senator Isakson, you have defied that age. Senator Isakson has always been open to that tough conversation, and you've always been open to finding common sense solutions to forge on common ground. And that is why I'm so proud to follow in your footsteps as the representative from Georgia's 6th Congressional District. It is why I work so hard to make sure that we are passing bipartisan bills that will help protect the communities that we truly love. I thank you, sir. I thank you so much for your service to the people of Georgia and your service to the freedom of our country. Godspeed, my friend. God bless. And I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentlelady, and I now yield to my friend and colleague, Mr. Woodall.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I'm enjoying listening to the partnership conversation. I want to come from a different perspective, though. I want to talk about the partisanship conversation. When I was 6 years old and Senator Isakson was elected as a U.S. House member, it was 23 out of 180 members of the House, as I recall. And I don't know how many there were before you got there, Senator. But being a Republican in Georgia in 1976 was not a popular thing to do. And I think about all the things that we want to do together in this body, Senator. And I think about folks who say, oh, we can't do that. It's too hard. It's going to take too long. Let's do something today, but let's not focus on those long-term goals. You might think that when Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980 that was a big jump in Georgia. As I recall, there were still 23 members in the U.S., in the Georgia House in Georgia in 1980, 23 out of 180. Somebody had to be the first one to stand up. And we talk about partisanship in this institution, Madam Speaker, like it's a bad thing. What I have always loved about you, Senator, is you have never been embarrassed to be a Republican. You knew what you believed. You knew why you believed it. Now, you might not like the way someone else expresses their Republican values, but you led with your heart. You can sit right beside a Democratic hero like John Lewis, and I can't tell a difference when it comes to Southern gentility, but you'll never be embarrassed to share who you are as a Republican. That's what it takes to grow from 23 members in a 180-member body into the institution that Tom Graves had an opportunity to serve, and into the institution that so many of our colleagues had a chance to serve. And we talk about bipartisanship as that holy grail. It requires partisanship to get there, and but for the example that you set, we wouldn't have the Republican Party in Georgia, and we wouldn't have Isakson values in that party. Talked about partisanship, Madam Speaker. I want to talk about people as the second part of that. I've always imagined the roughest part about being a United States Senator, is that you lose that one-on-one contact that you've had. In a congressional district, you can get to know people. You can be with them in community. Your entire career has been about people. I watch you when you walk into a room, folks that I ought to know who they are because I've worked with them. I just can't remember. I see you go up and greet them by name. Folks that have come into the room from all different congressional districts. You've got a relationship with them. Maybe from back in 76 when you were trying to grow the party across the state. Maybe from back when you were leading education. Maybe from back in the 6th District. Maybe from your time as a United States Senator. But you've always put people first. I see that in every speech you've given in Gwinnett and Forsyth counties. You'll stand up. You'll always thank the staffers who are working for you. It's your Academy Day that I enjoy the most. That's my favorite time that we spend together each year. And if you don't know, Madam Speaker, the Isakson Academy Day is a statewide event that brings all the young men and women who love an opportunity. They can do anything they want to with their life. They want to serve the United States of America. They want to be the future generation of leaders. And even as young as 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, they come to this event that Senator Isakson puts together. Talk about all the lives that you've changed here in this institution. Don't even get started on the number of lives you've changed as it relates to leadership and opportunity to serve through your Academy Day. Thinking about you being a Republican's Republican. I think about Reva Jennings in Forsyth County. You know Reva. She is as hardcore. And for folks who don't know, Madam Speaker, Forsyth County is one of the most conservative counties in the state of Georgia. Conservative state, conservative county. Reva Jennings has been building that Republican Party up there for as long as anyone can remember. We lost her in an untimely way. But while everybody loves you on your way out the door, Senator, you might remember a tough primary season or two where folks might come to you and say, Johnny, why aren't you more angry about this? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you? And as Republican primary seasons are, we tend to eat our own. And Reva Jennings, the first time I met her, was fielding one of those questions. Somebody came up and said, we've got to get somebody to challenge that Johnny Isakson in the next primary. He's soft for a Republican. Now, you know Reva, she doesn't have any softness in her. She went right to your steel backbone. She went right after it. She took it to that whole crowd of Republicans, saying you can poor mouth anybody you want to in this town, but you cannot poor mouth Johnny Isakson because he's done more for the Republican Party than anybody in this state has. And let me tell you how. It's not hard to find detractors out there these days. It's hard to build those lifelong friendships that create that gift of relationship that you have offered so many. You've offered to me. I'm grateful to you for it. I wouldn't be standing here today but for the work you've done over those years. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Scott, for putting this together. Indeed, something well-deserved. You know, I rise today to recognize a great Georgian and a great senator. You know, Senator Isakson, I've been blessed in my life. The grandson of a tobacco farmer, the son of a paper mill worker, and here I am walking the halls of Congress. In the short period of time that I've had to serve here, I've witnessed many great things. Got to listen to the Pope, something I never thought I would have the opportunity to do, one of the great religious leaders in the world, right here in this room. But I think what I just saw just a few minutes ago when I saw not only two great Georgians, but two great Americans, John Lewis and Johnny Isakson, embrace. You know, I pinch myself sometimes. How did this happen to me? How did I get to witness all these great things in my life? I want to thank you both. And I want to thank you especially, Senator Isakson. I've been fortunate to call you a friend and a mentor for many years. You know, I've had many political mentors in my life, Tom Triplett, Tom Coleman, just to name a few, and Johnny Isakson. I can remember hearing the story from then minority leader of the House of Representatives in the Georgia State House, when you, Senator Isakson, would tell the story of leading such a small group that General Custer had better odds than you had at that time. I'll never forget that. And you know, it taught me perseverance. It taught me to always work hard and to continue on. And I've always looked at that and admired that in you, and I appreciate it very much. Your dedication to our state and our nation has truly been unmatched, and is something that I've admired throughout all my time in public service. Senator Isakson, you're one of the greatest Georgians to ever serve, and one of the only Georgian, in fact, the only Georgian to have ever served in the Georgia State House, in the Georgia State Senate, in the House of Representatives, and in the United States Senate. I got 3 out of 4. I don't know if I'll ever make it across over here, but if I do, I'm going to catch you, because I've had the honor as well. And at each of those levels that you've served, you've been successful in advancing policies for the betterment of the state of Georgia and for the United States of America. And I think that's what's so very important. Everywhere you've been, every step of the way, it's always been for the people, always been for the betterment of our state and of our nation. During a time in our political history in which Americans seem to be increasingly divided, I've always looked to you as one of the most important achievements that I think that you've made is to build bipartisanship, is to reach across the aisle, is to come together. You know, I hear my staff tell the story of, you don't hear about Senator Isakson being involved in a big fight over in the Senate, but in the background, he's in a knife fight, and he's winning. You know, that's what we all aspire to do. We all want to be known as statesmen, and we all want to be successful and win our matches, but you are, and we don't even know about it most of the time. For example, you've always been a staunch supporter of our nation's veterans, and I think that's extremely important for all of us to remember. Chair of the Veterans Committee for so many years, and I've heard the stories of problems at the VA and of Senator Isakson picking up the phone and calling the family member and apologizing. Now, this is the chair of the Senate Veterans Committee calling someone and apologizing for them having a problem at the VA center. Can you imagine? But that's what we admire. The overhaul to the VA Veterans Choice Program, modernizing VA hospitals in the Mission Act, all of these signed into law as a result of your efforts. Every year for over a decade, Senator Isakson has held a barbecue in the Russell Building to feed his colleagues from both sides of the aisle. Now at the retirement at the end of this year, the state of Georgia, the United States of America, loses one of its great political assets. And I know you've made the point that you're going to sprint through the finish line, and that's important. I want to thank you, Senator, for your service to our state. I want to thank you for your service to our nation. I want to thank you for the example that you have set for people like me. Thank you for always being a step above the political infighting in order to do what you truly thought was best for Georgians. And as you continue to do what is best for your health, you and Diane will always be in my thoughts and prayers. Thank you, Senator, for your service to our country. God bless you.
Madam Speaker, could I inquire as to how much time we have remaining?
The gentleman has 18 minutes remaining.
18 minutes, ma'am? 18?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I now yield to my friend and colleague, Mr. LOUDERMILK.
Thank you, Representative Scott, for this time here, and thank you for organizing this. It's a moment that I'm sure all of us are having mixed feelings. There's been a lot of accolades given here today to Senator Isakson, a lot of talk about his accomplishments, which are absolutely many. What a lot of people don't understand about Georgia is we have legends. There are legends from Georgia that if you go to any history book, you talk to anybody, they will recognize those names as Georgia. I mean, James Oglethorpe is one of those, the founder of Georgia. Sam Nunn, Zell Miller, John Lewis, Dr. Martin Luther King. Of course, everybody knows Vince Dooley, the legendary coach of the University of Georgia. Others like Tom Murphy, the longest serving Speaker of the House in the nation that served in the Georgia State House that I know that Senator Isakson served with when he was in the State House. I believe that Johnny Isakson is one of those legends as well. As was mentioned, he is the only Georgian in the history of our state, the history of this nation, to serve in both houses of the state legislature and both houses of the United States legislature. An accomplishment no one else has ever achieved. Now, the one thing I know about Senator Isakson is the character of the man. That he didn't accomplish those things because it was a personal goal, it was because of a heart of service. And one thing that I have been able to consistently and honestly say about Senator Isakson is that he's a statesman. And that's something that seems to be lost in the line of politics today, are those that are true statesmen. And there are some things about him and things about statesmen that are common across the board. One is truthfulness. And I can tell you that Senator Isakson, Johnny will tell you the truth, even if it's something you don't want to hear. But yet he will tell you in a way that you will appreciate that, because he's doing it to uplift you and to make you better, not to draw you down. Faithfulness. He has been faithful to his faith, his God, his family, his political beliefs, his party, but more importantly, this country and the institutions that he's represented. Another is trust. That is something that is lacking in modern politics, but I can tell you this, that Johnny Isakson has never, ever told me something that I ever questioned after that. If he told you he was going to do something, it was going to happen. Loyalty. Loyalty is another area that he has always been loyal to those who are his friends, for those he represents, for his nation and for his state. Commitment. He's a very committed person to those things which he believes in. Civility is one of those that really is lost today. But as many have spoken here today, he has not only reached across the aisle, but he's reached across the state to try to bring civility back into politics. And the last one, which is, I think, most important to me, is friendship. The mark of a statesman is all of those, but mostly friendship. I was in another member of Congress's office recently, and Senator, there was a poster. It made me laugh. There was a poster on their wall that said, "If you want a friend in Washington, get a dog." Well, I don't think that member ever met Johnny Isakson, because he is a friend. Not only to me, he's a friend to Georgia. He's a friend to all of us. He's a friend of the United States. Senator, God bless you. Thank you for your service to our state. Thank you for our service to our nation. You will be missed. And I am so honored to be able to say I'm a friend of a legend from Georgia. God bless you.
I would remind my friend and colleague, as I yield to Mr. Allen, that Senator Isakson is a dog. He's a Georgia Bulldog. Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you, Austin, for organizing this time to honor, as said here many times, a legend. Of course, it's what I never thought I'd be standing here in front of two Georgia legends as I speak specifically about one. But I do rise today to honor my great mentor and friend, Senator Johnny Isakson. Along with greetings to Diane and your wonderful family. I was there last Saturday to witness your beloved Bulldogs beat my beloved Auburn Tigers. And congratulations on this, and I just hope and pray that they'll go all the way for you. And I think that'd be a great tribute. Johnny has been a champion for the state of Georgia for decades as a reflection of his many years of service. It's been mentioned about all of the accomplishments, a life of political service, and also a mention about his influence on education. You know, when I was first elected, I had not been in politics before, and I really didn't know how to get things done up here. But I did, as my service on Education and Labor Committee, was attracted to a bill called the Every Student Succeeds Act, and worked feverishly to get that bill passed in the House, and by a margin of mere 5 votes, 218 to 213. Well, it just so happened that sometime later, as we get together in Georgia for lunch, Johnny was asking me about that legislation. And I told him, I said, we're going to return control to the states. We're going to try to get the federal government out of the classroom so that our teachers can have more time to teach. And you quickly became a champion in the Senate and helped garner bipartisan support. Now, this is the way things should work. That bill, the Every Student Succeeds Act, then passed the Senate 81 to 17 and went to a conference committee, all because of the influence of this incredible man. When that version then came back to the House, I'm standing right there looking at our ranking member, and that bill passed in this House 359 to 64. I'd never seen anything like that, Johnny, and it's all owed to you, and the impact on education is going to be felt throughout this nation. It's quite a difference, and it shows the depths of your influence in these halls of Congress. And of course, throughout your service, you've demonstrated the true meaning of servant leadership by always putting the needs and priorities of Georgia first. In fact, the greatest servant leader in history said there is no greater love than to give your life for a friend, and you've given your life to a big part of it to this country, and we're thankful for it. As someone who came from the business world but had not served in public office before, I'm thankful for your leadership. Georgia has been named the best state to do business in the last 7 years, and there's no coincidence that you had a lot to do with it. I know that I can always call on you for sound advice and guidance. Now, even though you are retiring at the end of this year, I hope you know that we'll be still reaching out to you for advice. We will deeply miss you and your impact, and it will be missed for generations to come. There's no doubt that Georgia has big shoes to fill, and I think our delegation is up to the task, which is a testimony to your leadership and example to me and my colleagues. Johnny, please know that we will do our best to make you proud and honor your legacy. Robert, I wish you and Diane all the best during this next chapter in your life. God bless you and your family, and I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I now yield to my colleague, fellow Bulldog and Georgia Beta alumni, Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Senator Isakson, that feels a little formal saying it. Johnny, as a constituent, and how I know you, I want to thank you so much for your dedicated service to our state. As others have talked about their first meetings with you, I remember mine fondly. Not unlike my colleague, Mr. Graves, it was at the University of Georgia. I was a freshman, sitting on the steps of a fraternity house, completely clueless about the world, not having an understanding, self-absorbed. And I remember sitting on the steps as you came, had no idea who you were, and you talked to us about a brighter future. You talked to us about what it meant to be a Georgian. I remember when you left, I remember thinking two things from that moment. That's maybe the nicest person that I've ever heard from in my entire life. And secondly, I was pretty touched that someone was looking out for my future that didn't even know me. And over the years, as I watched you, begin to follow you, I saw that play out firsthand. I saw how important the state of Georgia was to you, and what made it important, the millions of Georgians that you love and care about, the ones that you don't know, the ones that you do know, the ones that are yet to come. Your unwavering commitment to make our state and this nation a better place for all of us is something that can never be forgotten. You have set a standard for being a gentleman and a statesman that we should all follow. It's pretty remarkable that we, as a Georgia delegation, are getting to sit here today and not only speak to you, but to our dear colleague John Lewis as well. Because many of those same things that we say about you, we have to say about our colleague Mr. Lewis. There's a genuine love for our Georgians, a sense of decency, a sense of optimism, the desire for a bright future. All of those things come through, not just in your words, but in your actions. And I want to thank you for that. 40 years of service to making our lives better. And I'm not exactly sure what piece of legislation you took up shortly after you met me, or I had the chance to meet you and hear from you on the steps of a fraternity house in Athens, Georgia. But I feel confident that whatever it was, it made my life better many years later. And I thank you for that. We ask that God continue to bless you and Diane, and know that we owe you a debt of gratitude that we'll never be able to repay. Thank you, and God bless you.
Madam Speaker, in the last few minutes, I want to thank all of my colleagues who joined us this afternoon, especially John Lewis, another icon from Georgia. Certainly America and the world is better off because of both of these men. I think the strong bipartisan presence here lends to the extraordinary impact that Senator Isakson has had on our delegation and the great respect that we have for his service to our state and our nation. Senator Isakson, I've been told that I can't call you Johnny on the floor. But if I could, I'd say, Johnny, we love you. Thank you for your service to the great state of Georgia. America, and the world is a better place because of the service that you have provided to our nation and your fellow man. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield the floor.